The courage to be hated. Nietzsche's philosophy of radical authenticity. The idea of the courage to be hated aligns strongly with Friedrich Nietzsche's philosophy, particularly his concepts of radical authenticity, self-overcoming, and the will to power. Nietzsche championed the idea that individuals must break free from societal expectations, moral dogmas, and external validations to truly affirm their own existence. Here's how this idea connects to his philosophy. Nietzsche's Beyond Good and Evil challenges the foundations of conventional morality, particularly the moral values that society imposes to maintain conformity. He argues that these moral codes are not absolute truths, but constructs designed to keep individuals in check. The courage to be hated, in this context, means rejecting imposed morality in favor of self-determined values. 1. The slave morality versus master morality. Nietzsche distinguishes between slave morality and master morality. Slave morality is rooted in weakness, promoting values like humility, obedience, and self-sacrifice. It arises from resentment, ressentiment, and seeks to suppress those who exhibit strength, ambition, and independence. Master morality, on the other hand, is the morality of the strong, those who create their own values and affirm life on their own terms. It is rooted in power, self-determination, and personal excellence. To defy social morality is to reject the morality of the herd and embrace one's own inner authority, even if it results in rejection or hatred from the collective. 2. The danger of herd mentality. Nietzsche warns that the majority lives by borrowed values, afraid to think for themselves. Society encourages conformity because it is easier to control individuals who fear standing alone. The moment one steps outside of these norms, whether in thought, action, or belief, they become a target of criticism. To walk the path of the independent thinker, one must have the courage to be disliked. This is the price of intellectual and spiritual freedom. 3. The free spirit, living beyond social approval. Nietzsche describes the free spirit as one who liberates themselves from imposed morality and thinks beyond conventional dichotomies of good and evil. Such individuals are willing to deconstruct inherited beliefs and embrace a philosophy of radical authenticity. The free spirit does not seek approval from the herd. They embrace discomfort and opposition as necessary steps toward growth. They understand that to be truly free means to risk being misunderstood or even despised. 4. True morality comes from within. For Nietzsche, morality should not be something imposed externally. It should arise from within. The courageous individual does not accept morality blindly but tests and refines their values through experience, struggle, and self-reflection. To live beyond good and evil is to step outside the limiting framework of societal morality and instead create one's own path. This requires the willingness to be seen as dangerous, rebellious, or even immoral by those who cling to conventional norms. Final thought: are you willing to be hated? Nietzsche's challenge is clear. Do you have the courage to define your own morality, even if it makes you an outsider? Do you dare to live according to your own values, even if society brands you as wrong or dangerous? True greatness requires this defiance. The one who fears being hated remains forever bound by the expectations of others. The will to power, embracing self-assertion. Nietzsche's concept of the will to power is one of his most profound and misunderstood ideas. At its core, it is not just about domination or control over others, but about self-overcoming, growth, and the affirmation of life. It is the force that drives individuals to transcend limitations, create meaning, and fully express their unique potential. To embrace the will to power is to develop the courage to be hated, because true self-assertion often means rejecting the expectations imposed by society, morality, and tradition. 1. The will to power as the driving force of life. Nietzsche saw the will to power as the fundamental force of existence, more essential than the mere struggle for survival, contra Darwin. Life is not just about self-preservation. It is about expansion, transformation, and the pursuit of one's highest potential. Everything in nature seeks to grow, dominate, and express itself fully. This applies to individuals. Those who embrace their will to power strive for greatness, while those who suppress it live passively under the rule of others. To live according to the will to power means to assert oneself unapologetically, even at the cost of being opposed, criticized, or hated. 2. Strength versus weakness, choosing self-determination. Nietzsche contrasts strong individuals, who embrace the will to power, with the weak, who avoid conflict and seek comfort in conformity. The strong, they take risks, create their own values, and challenge societal norms. They are willing to be hated because they do not seek approval, they seek self-expression. The weak, they avoid struggle, seek validation from the herd, and resent those who rise above them. Their morality is based on fear, not strength. To embrace self-assertion is to rise above the fear of judgment and recognize that being disliked by the weak is a sign of strength. 3. The will to power and creativity, becoming a creator of values. Nietzsche believed that the highest expression of the will to power was the creation of new values. Instead of living by inherited beliefs, the powerful individual defines their own truth and shapes their own destiny. This is where the Übermensch, Overman, emerges, the one who creates rather than conforms. To create means to challenge the existing order, which inevitably invites opposition. If you live for truth, authenticity, and greatness, you will be hated, but this is a necessary consequence of self-assertion. 4. The struggle against mediocrity. Most people fear self-assertion because it separates them from the herd. They settle for mediocrity to avoid the discomfort of standing alone. Nietzsche urges us to reject this path and instead affirm life boldly, accept struggle, risk, and hardship as part of the journey. Develop inner strength. Rely on yourself rather than external validation. Refuse to play small. Do not dim your light to make others comfortable. To embrace the will to power means to fully own who you are, even when it provokes resistance from those who fear their own potential. 5. Final thought. Are you afraid to assert yourself? Many shrink back from life because they fear rejection. But Nietzsche teaches that true power comes from self-mastery and radical self-affirmation. The one who fully embraces their will to power is willing to be hated because they understand that greatness and conformity cannot coexist. If you seek to rise, you must be willing to stand alone. Are you ready to embrace your power? The Übermensch, rising above the herd. One of Nietzsche's most revolutionary ideas is the concept of the Übermensch, Overman, or Superman. The Übermensch is not a mere ideal. It is a challenge, a call to transcend limitations, mediocrity, and societal conditioning. To become the Übermensch is to rise above the herd, forge one's own path, and live with an unshaken will. But this path is not for the weak. To embody it, one must embrace the courage to be hated, for the herd resists anyone who dares to be truly free. 1. What is the Übermensch? The Übermensch is the one who creates their own values instead of blindly following inherited morality, rises above herd mentality and embraces independence, affirms life fully, without seeking meaning in an afterlife or external authority, seeks self-overcoming, constantly evolving into a greater version of themselves. Nietzsche saw the Übermensch as the next stage of human evolution, not in a biological sense, but in terms of consciousness, will, and power. 2. Why the herd hates the Übermensch. The herd, those who live in fear, conformity, and mediocrity, naturally resents those who rise above them. The Übermensch challenges everything they believe in, exposing their weaknesses and self-deception. The herd hates the Übermensch because they fear true freedom and the responsibility it brings. They cling to slave morality, which teaches submission and self-denial. They feel inferior in the presence of someone who has mastered themselves. Thus, the one who dares to rise must be prepared to face resistance, criticism, and even hatred. 3. Breaking free from the herd mentality. To become the Übermensch, one must break free from the chains of societal conditioning. Stop seeking approval. The herd rewards obedience, not greatness. Reject imposed morality. Create your own values based on strength, not submission. Embrace struggle and solitude. Growth requires breaking away from comfort and mediocrity. Nietzsche urges us to destroy old idols, including outdated religious, political, and moral beliefs that keep people weak. The Übermensch does not bow to these structures, but creates new meaning. 4. Self-overcoming. The continuous evolution of the Übermensch. The Übermensch is not a static ideal, but an ongoing process of self-overcoming, Selbstüberwindung. This means constantly challenging oneself, never settling for mediocrity, turning suffering into strength, using hardships as fuel for growth, living with intensity, engaging in life fully, instead of escaping into distractions or nihilism. The Übermensch understands that the only true meaning in life is the meaning we create for ourselves. 5. Final thought. Are you willing to rise? To walk the path of the Übermensch is to embrace radical self-reliance, unshakable will, and fearless authenticity. It is to step beyond the limitations of the herd and carve out one's own destiny. But this path is not easy. It requires the courage to be hated, misunderstood, and even feared. Most will never take it. Amor fati, loving one's fate despite criticism. At the core of Nietzsche's philosophy is the idea of amor fati, the love of fate. It is not just about accepting what happens, but embracing it fully, seeing every challenge, failure, and criticism as essential to one's growth. To walk the path of radical authenticity, to think, speak, and act independently, means inviting opposition, rejection, and even hatred from the herd. But if one truly embraces amor fati, none of this matters. Instead of resisting fate or lamenting adversity, one affirms everything is part of the process of becoming. 1. What is amor fati? Nietzsche describes amor fati as the attitude of someone who does not wish for life to be different, but instead embraces it fully as it is, sees obstacles and criticism as fuel for growth rather than reasons to despair, accepts suffering and hardship as necessary, not as punishment, but as opportunities for strength. To love one's fate means to say yes to life in its totality, without resentment, regret, or self-pity. 2. Why criticism is a gift. One of the greatest obstacles to living authentically is the fear of judgment. Society trains people to seek approval, to conform, to avoid upsetting others. But to live as a free spirit, one must break free from this conditioning. Nietzsche's challenge. If you truly stand for something, you will be criticized. If you push against mediocrity, the herd will resist you. If you carve your own path, people will misunderstand you. But amor fati teaches that this is not a curse. It is a sign that you are on the right path. The more resistance you face, the more evidence that you are breaking free from the herd. 3. Turning pain into power. Nietzsche rejects the idea that suffering is meaningless. Instead, he sees it as the very thing that shapes greatness. The strongest individuals are those who take pain, rejection, and opposition and use it as fuel for their will to power. Criticism, a chance to strengthen conviction. Failure, a lesson in resilience. Loneliness, a gift that sharpens self-reliance. Everything that happens, good or bad, is part of your transformation. To love fate is to recognize that nothing is against you, everything is for you. 4. The eternal yes, living without regret. Nietzsche imagined a thought experiment called the eternal recurrence, the idea that you would have to live your life over and over, exactly as it is, for eternity. If this idea fills you with dread, it means you are living in resistance to life. But if you can say yes, let it be so, then you are truly embracing amor fati. The goal is to live in such a way that, no matter what happens, pain, rejection, criticism, you wouldn't change a thing. 5. Final thought. Are you ready to love your fate? To fully embrace amor fati is to let go of the need for approval, to stop resisting hardship, and to love even the struggles that shake you. It is to stand firm in who you are, no matter how the world reacts. This is the mark of true power. Loneliness as a path to greatness. Nietzsche often spoke of solitude as essential for self-discovery, self-overcoming, and ultimately, greatness. The path of the Übermensch, the one who transcends the herd, is a lonely one, because true independence separates you from those who remain trapped in conformity. But this loneliness is not a curse. It is a crucible, a sacred space where the strongest individuals forge themselves. To walk the path of greatness, one must embrace the courage to be alone, even when it means rejection, misunderstanding, and hatred. 1. The danger of the herd. Why most fear loneliness? Most people seek belonging above all else. They cling to the herd because they fear thinking for themselves. It is easier to follow than to lead. They fear rejection. Society rewards obedience, not independence. They fear responsibility. True freedom means taking full ownership of life. But Nietzsche warns that the herd suffocates greatness. It discourages deep thought, bold action, and radical self-expression. To rise above, one must break away. This separation is painful. It leads to loneliness, but it is necessary. 2. Zarathustra's solitude, the power of self-exile. In Thus Spoke Zarathustra, Nietzsche's prophet Zarathustra begins his journey by retreating into the mountains for 10 years. Why? Because solitude allows him to develop his own thoughts, free from the influence of the masses. He gains inner strength, unshaken by external approval or criticism. He becomes a master of himself, rather than a follower of others. Only after this period of self-exile does Zarathustra descend to share his wisdom, but he quickly realizes that the people are not ready. The masses mock him, reject him, and cling to their old beliefs. And so, he returns to solitude. Nietzsche's message is clear. If you wish to evolve, you must embrace solitude. If you seek greatness, you will not be understood by the weak. 3. Loneliness as a sign of strength. The fear of being alone keeps most people small. They would rather fit in than stand apart. But Nietzsche challenges us to flip this perspective. If you feel alone, it means you are breaking free. If you are misunderstood, it means you are thinking for yourself. If you are rejected, it means you are no longer dependent on approval. Loneliness is not a punishment. It is proof that you are stepping beyond the limits of the herd. 4. The transformation of solitude. True solitude is not just isolation. It is a process of becoming. When embraced fully, it allows for deep self-reflection, seeing who you truly are beyond societal conditioning, spiritual and mental strength, learning to rely only on yourself, creative power. All great works are born in solitude, not in distraction. The strongest individuals seek solitude willingly. They use it as fuel, as space to create, grow, and evolve. 5. Final thought. Can you walk alone? To rise to greatness is to walk a path few will understand. It will be lonely. It must be lonely. But if you can embrace solitude, not as suffering, but as a path to power, you will transcend the herd. Conclusion. The radical freedom of being yourself. To live authentically, to fully embrace who you are without compromise, is an act of radical freedom. Nietzsche's philosophy is not for those who seek comfort, validation, or easy answers. It is for those who dare to stand alone, create their own values, and rise above the herd. This path demands defying social morality, beyond good and evil, rejecting imposed beliefs, and thinking for oneself. Embracing self-assertion, the will to power, choosing strength over conformity, even when it means being hated. Rising above the herd, the Übermensch, breaking free from mediocrity to create one's own destiny. Loving one's fate, amor fati, accepting and affirming every challenge as fuel for growth. Walking alone, loneliness as a path to greatness. Finding strength in solitude rather than fearing it. The price of freedom. Radical authenticity comes at a cost. Those who refuse to conform will be misunderstood, criticized, and even despised. But Nietzsche reminds us, this is the mark of the free spirit. The masses live in fear. You will live in power. The herd seeks comfort. You will seek truth. The weak resent greatness. You will rise anyway. This is the courage to be hated, not as an act of rebellion, but as an affirmation of self. Final thought. Will you choose yourself? Most people will never take this path. They will surrender to expectations, avoid conflict, and remain trapped in mediocrity. But for those who dare, who embrace the will to power and walk the path of the Übermensch, the reward is total freedom. No gods, no masters, no approval needed. Only one question remains. Do you have the courage to be yourself, fully, unapologetically, and without fear?